Knuckle deep thought.
What's up, you YouTube fuckers? It's the Filthy Mouth Gamer, and we're back with another episode of Knuckle Deep Thoughts. This is episode number 2. Today we'll be discussing marijuana prohibition. It actually should be considered cannabis prohibition because marijuana is a bullshit propaganda term, but I digress. I'll get to that later. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, decided recently not to remove cannabis from the Schedule 1 grouping of narcotics or drugs. Now, if you don't know what Schedule 1 means, a Schedule 1 drug is something that can possibly be abused and has no medical or medicinal value whatsoever. Another drug that's on Schedule 1 is heroin. I don't think I have to tell you how fucking ridiculous it is to compare heroin with cannabis. So there's 5 schedules. Schedule 2 drug can be abused as well, but it has some medicinal value. One of the Schedule 2 drugs is cocaine, which I don't really know the number, but a lot of fucking people have died from using cocaine. Not a single fucking person in history has ever died from smoking or ingesting marijuana. That's a fact. Yet the DEA would like to pretend that marijuana, or what it should be called, cannabis, is just as dangerous or is one of the most dangerous substances out there that might be abused. Now, let's start at the beginning. Cannabis wasn't always illegal. Back in the 1930s, I believe it's 1937, I could be fucking wrong. It's when cannabis was made illegal. And the way this all started was hemp, which comes from the male plant, I believe. I could be wrong. Google it, you motherfuckers. I don't know. But hemp is a fiber that comes from the cannabis plant. And it makes some of the best materials and the strongest materials known to man. As a matter of fact, the original draft of the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp. Back in the days of the founding forefathers, if you owned a farm, you were forced to grow hemp on that farm. Fast forward to the 20th century, the 1930s. There was an invention of a machine called the decoricator. Now, basically, it was a machine that processed hemp fiber without having to do it by hand. Think of it as like the cotton gin, but for hemp. Now, hemp at the time was on the cover of Time magazine, I believe, and it was looked at as the future of textiles and materials. As a matter of fact, I believe one of the prototypes of the Model T Ford its body was made of hemp fiber because it's very strong. It's stronger than steel, but it's also lighter. So basically, the fuckery started because there was a guy, very rich. His name is William Randolph Hearst. And he owned a bunch of paper mills, and he owned a bunch of newspapers as well, among other things. And basically, when the Decoricator, and I might be fucking that name up, but it changed everything. If he wanted to use hemp for his newspapers, well, first of all, his paper mills were basically based on wood, okay? By using hemp, his fucking paper mills, probably down the line, would go out of business. Secondly, he'd have to change all his newspaper facilities to use hemp paper. So, it's a common theme with rich cunts. They don't like to dip into their pocket, even if it makes the world a better place. So what does this prick William Randolph Hearst do? Instead of, you know, dipping in his pocket, which would have fucking, in the grand scheme of things, wouldn't even affected his wealth, he decides to instead use his newspapers to demonize cannabis. In his newspapers, he linked cannabis use to Mexicans. Basically said that Mexicans would smoke this cannabis and that they would rape women in the United States. More specifically, white women. That's where the term marijuana came from, because marijuana is obviously based in Hispanic language. So the term marijuana was created just so it was automatically linked to Mexicans whenever it was spoke about. So now you fast forward to this big hearing that was happening with the United States government back in the 30s. Now, I'm not going to get really into much detail, but let's put it to you this way. One of the people that was speaking at the hearing against cannabis said that he once smoked a marijuana cigarette and he turned into a bat and started flying around the room. That's for real. I didn't make that up. Go look it up if you don't fucking believe me. My first thought when I heard that was, where the fuck do I get my hands on that? I want some of that. Now, fast forward to now. The DEA and the Justice Department and the federal government and state governments, they don't give a shit about protecting anyone's health or keeping them off drugs. They're not doing this to save a single fucking life. The only thing they're saving by keeping it Schedule 1 is first their own jobs, because if marijuana or cannabis, see, I even fucking call it marijuana like an asshole, I'm even roped into it because that's what it's been called my whole life. Cannabis, if it became legal, you wouldn't need as many fucking law enforcement officers or DEA agents, now would you? So they're doing it based on their own interests. Also, hemp can make many things. It can make paper, rope, it can make oil. It can make plastic, stronger plastic, biodegradable plastic. Who do you think that hurts? Oil companies? Do you think the oil companies have just a little bit of fucking influence in the United States government? Yeah, I think they do. Also, on the smoking and using side, cannabis, more specifically cannabis oil, has been solving a lot of problems lately with parents using it for kids with epileptic seizures, that have cancer, migraines, anxiety. Recently I heard there was a kid that was severely autistic and he didn't speak. Within 2 days using cannabis oil, he was speaking. So, let's see. What would it hurt to grow a plant in your backyard that would solve a lot of major medical problems? Or who would it hurt? Oh, that's right. The multi-hundred-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry, who would rather you take their drugs like OxyContin and oxycodone that people not only die from at an exponentially higher rate than marijuana or motherfucker cannabis, but that they make their whole livelihood is based on those pills. Your government and law enforcement doesn't give a shit about you or what's good for you or what's good for your family. They only give a shit about what's good for them and what's good for their families. Remember that. Always keep that in mind. I don't give a fuck if you're talking about Democrats or you're talking about Republicans. They're both on the same page with this. They both work for the pharmaceutical industry and the energy industry and all other industries. And if something like cannabis comes around and might cut into their fucking profits big time, then they can't have that. Now what's funny is some of the biggest lobbyists against cannabis legalization are alcohol companies. Now alcohol is possibly the most dangerous drug out there. And the reason I say that is it's the only drug that you could die from the withdrawals. And, not to mention, I can go pretty much anywhere, in any restaurant, in every block, and get my fucking hands on it. But that's okay, right? That's okay. Alcohol's fine. It's cannabis. Cannabis is the problem. Even though it hasn't killed a single fucking person, it does the opposite. It helps people. It keeps people calm sometimes. It makes people happy. It cures diseases that make billions of dollars for companies. That's why it's public enemy #1. Not because it's fucking dangerous. That's fucking absolute bullshit. And if you fucking believe any of the shit this pathetic government tells you about cannabis, you should have your fucking head examined. At the very least, start reading books. It's just a little tip from the fucking filthy mouth gamer. Okay, fellas? Fuck the federal government in their dirty twat.